Greetings and welcome to the University of Minnesota Alumni Association's webinar series. My name is John Ruzek and I'm the Senior Director of Alumni Networks and your host today. Thanks to all the alumni and friends who have made time to join us over the noon hour here Central Time. Really excited about this upcoming webinar because we really want to know what makes you want to get out of bed in the morning. These days, the answer to that question seems more difficult than ever to answer. And in just a few minutes, we'll be hearing a webinar from our featured presenter, Richard Leider, based on his perennial best-selling book, The Power of Purpose, Finding Meaning, Live Longer and Better. We think this webinar will help attendees unlock the power of their purpose and work and live in ways that align with that purpose. And today's webinar is part of an ongoing free series being offered by the University of Minnesota Alumni Association, where we're having conversations with experts about career, life, and learning topics. And since we've launched the series 2 years ago, we've had over 4,300 alumni and friends join us live and over 12,000 YouTube views. And initiatives like this are made possible in part by our association members like you, so thank you. And because of members, we can create powerful opportunities for students in more than 466,000 alumni around the world. And if you're interested in joining the Alumni Association, you can see our membership web address there at the bottom of the screen. And if you like these webinars, we have some upcoming ones here in October. One on dressing for career success on October 6th. And I will be actually hosting a very informal LinkedIn advice one on October 19th. So if LinkedIn is a mystery to you, tune in and I'll hopefully give you some tips. And you can find those at umnalumni.org/virtual. We also have an upcoming virtual networking event between students and alumni on October 5th, and that information also can be found on our virtual web page as well. It's a great way for alumni to give advice back to students or students to get some advice from alumni. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You have joined the presentation listening using your computer speaker system by default. If you'd prefer to listen over the telephone, just select telephone in the audio pane of your GoToWebinar panel and dial-in information will be displayed. If you experience audio difficulties while listening via computer speakers, this can be caused by having multiple applications open or perhaps you're on wireless versus a hardwired connection. So feel free to close any unnecessary applications on your computer. Questions are welcome and you may submit them at any time. The presenter today will probably present for about 40 minutes and then we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So I'll have those queued up towards the end. And we do want to hear from you. So definitely type in along the way. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's featured speaker, Richard Leider, best-selling author and keynote speaker of the Purpose Company, is one of America's preeminent executive life coaches. He is ranked by Forbes as one of the top 5 most respected executive coaches and by the Conference Board as a legend in coaching. Richard's 10 books, including 3 bestsellers, have sold over 1 million copies and have been translated into 20 languages. Repacking Your Bags and The Power of Purpose are considered classics in the personal development field. And he is also an executive fellow with the Carlson School of Management and also a senior fellow for the Center for Spirituality and Healing, both of those units here at the University of Minnesota. And we are absolutely delighted to have Richard join us today. Welcome, Richard.
Hey, John, thank you. It's a pleasure, and thank you for a very nice and kind introduction. And so I'm going to ask you to forward my slides for me, and let me just start with the first slide here. And I call this Purpose at Work. And I've been working on purpose, studying it, writing it, speaking about it for about 4 decades now. And over the last years, I've been interviewing people about their lives and getting in depth about what makes them tick and what makes them want to get out of bed in the morning. And so in interviewing elders, I started out interviewing people over the age of 65, including sitting under a tree like this in Africa. I've been looking at this all over the world, and I've been going to Africa for many, many years. This is a baobab tree, and sitting under the tree with elders in Africa, even looking at purpose from their perspective. So there are three themes that thread their way through this Purpose at Work study and work. And here's what they are. When I've asked elders, people over the age of 65, older adults, let's say, if they could live their life over, what would they do differently? There are three themes. One is they said they'd be more reflective the second time around. They'd step back and look at the big picture. And I asked them, well, why do they say that? And they said, well, usually when they were reflective was during a crisis. So I don't know about the people online here, but often times we are in a busy world. We're always on with our telephones or our computers or always going somewhere, never being anywhere, and then all of a sudden we get a wake-up call, a triggering event, or something that causes us to push the pause button and step back. So today we're pushing the pause button and being a little reflective. Second theme is they said if they could live their life over again, they'd take more risks the second time around. They'd be more courageous in two areas, work and love, work and relationships. The number one regret of almost all of the people I've talked to did not have to do with, what it had to do with was work and relationships. Those are the two areas where they got the most joy and the most pain. And so number one regret really was around work, which I'm going to talk about, and that's why I call this Purpose at Work today. But number one regret was that they did not find a better fit for themselves in the work world. And I said, why is that so important? And they, what it got down to is they spend about 60% of their life working. And when we invest 60% of your time in anything, you're going to have some regrets that perhaps that if you didn't spend it wisely. So that's the second thread about courage and about choice. Third theme of the elders or the older adults was purpose. Every single person I've interviewed, thousands and thousands of people, have said that I wish I would have understood my own sense of purpose earlier in life. That we all want to leave a dent, make our mark, leave a thumbprint, and ultimately as we get older we understand that really what's important is who we brought to what we do. And it's not just at work, it's at home, it's in faith-based organizations, it's in our friends and community. So Purpose at Work, three themes: reflect, courage, and meaning or purpose. And let's take a look, John, at the next slide here. So what is this purpose thing anyway? Well, purpose is the answer to this question. What gets you out of bed in the morning? Other than the rooster crowing or the alarm clock going off, why do you really get up in the morning? According to the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, only 1 out of 3 people, or I should say 1 out of 3 people, does not have a reason to get up in the morning, and it affects their health and their healing and their happiness and a lot of other things. So I don't know who on the line are the 1 out of 3, but usually in any group there's 1 out of 3 people who's really scratching their heads about why they get up in the morning. And it could be that they've just at a certain age or stage of life where they're asking themselves that fundamental question, or it could be that they're in a triggering event. And also another 1 out of 3 statistic is this: 1 out of 3 people today is in transition. Often it's a work transition, a health transition, a divorce or relationship partner transition, and of course work. And so a lot of reasons to stop and pause and look at the big picture here. But let me just say that purpose is not a luxury. Purpose is fundamental. It's fundamental to our health. It's fundamental to our healing, to our happiness, and ultimately to our productivity. We're all an experiment of one in the world. We all have our own reasons, but purpose is one of the fundamental core reasons that, as I said, that is fundamental to our lives. So let's do a brief checkup here. Sometimes we do a financial checkup. Sometimes we do a health checkup. Let's do a meaning checkup. There's money, there's medicine, and there's meaning. Let's do the third M, meaning. So first of all, let's look at the next slide, John, the science of purpose. I just came out this last year with my third edition of The Power of Purpose. It's been an international bestseller for many years, so why did I have to write it again? Well, the reason was this. I've matured and learned, and I wanted to share what I've learned. And one of the things I learned, I put 4 new chapters into this book, and the last chapter is, Can Science Explain Purpose? And the answer is yes. So I've spent time in the neuroscience labs. I've spent time talking with doctors, psychologists, neuroscientists about purpose in the brain. And let me give you an example of one. A man who wrote a book called Boost the Brain, Dr. Majid Fatoui, who's a neuroscientist, a neurologist, trained at Johns Hopkins, is now in Georgetown, Washington, D.C. But in talking with Dr. Fatoui, he said this. He said, Richard, imagine a pill. Imagine a pill, if you will, that would reduce the effects of Alzheimer's, that would, in fact, reduce microscopic stroke by as much as 40%. It would help with sleep apnea and other things like that. And he went on and on listing, and he said, what would you pay for that pill? And I went, it couldn't be possible. And he said, well, not only is it possible, but the pill is free. And I said, what is it? And he looked me squarely in the eyes and he said, purpose. What we're learning about purpose in the brain is this. In terms of the brain, and particularly the hippocampus in the brain, there's something called neuroplasticity. And when we are engaged in purposeful activities, not just activities that keep us busy, but activities that really have meaning for us, it affects the neuroplasticity, and the brain actually grows and expands as we age. Some areas it shrinks, as we know. We can't find our keys, we can't find our glasses, but the part of the brain that's the wisdom part of the brain and the fundamental memory part of the brain can actually expand with purpose. And so one of the interesting things is there is a longevity revolution going on. We are living longer. In 1900, the average life expectancy in the U.S. was age 46. Now that average life expectancy is in the 80s. And with the longevity revolution comes the possibility of 3 more decades. And we need to keep our brains healthy during those 3 decades. And one of the ways to do that, as I said, we're all an experiment of one. We all have our own genetics and our own health concerns and healthiness factors, but we need purpose. 2/3 of all the people in the world, 2/3 of all the people in the world who have ever lived past the age of 65 are alive today. And what are they going to do with those 3 decades? That's part of what I'm working on. And so let's look at the next slide here. Fundamental number 1 is that purpose is a choice. Life lesson number 1, I hope that you'll remember, is that purpose is a choice. I went into a bookstore recently. I'm kind of a bookstore junkie. I love books. I love to buy them. I love to read them. I love to go into bookstores. And this was a bookstore called the Tattered Cover in Colorado, in Denver. Big independent bookstore, which I love. I happen to be in there. And I asked the lady in the front of the store, the information counter, I said, could you tell me where the self-help section is? Because I was looking to see if they were carrying my book, but I also like to look at what what people are reading in self-help these days. And so I said, where's the self-help section? She said, well, if I tell you, won't that defeat the whole purpose? Very wise comment, actually, very funny comment. And so I went to the self-help section, and book after book about these 3 decades of life, book after book about things happening in this whole area of purpose and meaning and longevity. And, with purpose and with life, sometimes we're pushed by pain. Other times we're pulled by possibility. Sometimes we have to choose. We have to make choices in our life because we're pushed to make them by circumstances. Other times we're pulled by age or phase or what's possible in our lives. But as the philosopher Schopenhauer said this, he said, all new ideas go through 3 phases. First, ridicule, then opposition, violent or aggressive opposition, and finally they become self-evident. Well, having studied purpose, I've gone through all three of those. I've been ridiculed about purpose being too soft. I've looked at purpose and been opposed in certain ways in organizations and etc. Now it's self-evident. There's a social movement all across the planet. I call it the purpose movement, where people are looking for purposeful work, purposeful relationships, and long, purposeful lives. But purpose is a choice, and let me share why. Next slide, John, is from one of my mentors, Viktor Frankl. Frankl I met in 1967 when I was right out of graduate school. I spent a week with Viktor Frankl, and it was one of those fortuitous encounters that changed my life forever. And Frankl, for those of you who don't know it, here's the quote from him, wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And he said in that book, and he said in the seminar that I was with him for a week, he said, the last of the human freedoms is to choose your attitude in any given set of circumstances. Well, Viktor Frankl was in a series of 4 Nazi concentration camps. Frankl lived in Vienna. He's a Jewish man. He was a psychotherapist, a neurologist, a psychiatrist, training residents in what he called logotherapy or meaning therapy. He was a protege of Freud's and a contemporary of people like Carl Jung and Alfred Adler and others. At the height of his work, he was taken by the Nazis, as was his whole family, his pregnant wife, Tilly, his parents, his siblings, all taken in boxcar to a Nazi concentration camp. He survived, but he was the only one after 4 years that got out alive. The rest of them all perished. Frankl weighed 87 pounds when he was liberated from Auschwitz. Wasn't doing too well, he couldn't see too well. He went back, however, to Vienna, started working again, healed, and sat down in 9 days and wrote Man's Search for Meaning, which the Library of Congress claims is one of the 25 most influential books in American thought. And it's number 12 on the Library of Congress book of influential books. But Frankl taught me that we do have a choice. No matter what the circumstances are in our life, we have the choice as to why we get up in the morning, or when we get up in the morning, how we're going to face the day. And he said that to get up in the morning, even in a concentration camp, to give somebody else a kind word, a crust of bread, a hug, to envision your beloved, to see what you're going to do when you get that attitude, that mindset was imperative to survival. And so I learned then that my life's work, what I'd been studying and what I wanted to study, was about that choice, what I call the power of purpose. And there are really 3 myths that keep us from really looking at our aim in life. So let's look at the next slide here. Purpose is an aim outside of yourself. Like Frankl said, it's getting up and giving somebody else a kind word, a crust of bread, hope for the future in certain ways. And there are 3 myths that I've learned about purpose that keep us back from really manifesting this aim in life, which is outside of ourselves. One is that purpose is a cause, that you have to have some big cause like saving the world or saving the children or saving the planet. That's what purpose is about. Well, that is a good piece of purpose, but purpose is a mindset, not a cause. It's who you bring to a cause. It's who you bring to life on a day-to-day basis when you get up every day to go to work or to do whatever you do on a day-to-day basis. Second myth is that purpose is a revelation, that if you're at the right age or you have enough money or something along that line, that purpose somehow will reveal itself to you, and only if you're one of the lucky ones or the fortunate ones. And the fact is, no, purpose is not a revelation. Purpose is a practice. Purpose is an aim outside of yourself that you get up every day and decide to have purpose moments, decide to bring who you are to life. In fact, Frankl, the original title to his book was this: In Spite of Everything, Say Yes to Life. That's what we're talking about here with a mindset. In spite of everything, say yes to life. And so purpose is only revealed if you choose to get up and practice purpose on a day-to-day basis. Third luxury is that, our third myth is that purpose is a luxury. No, purpose is not a luxury. Purpose is, as I said earlier, fundamental to our health, our healing, our happiness, our longevity. In fact, the research that I report in The Power of Purpose New Edition is that purposeful people tend to live 7 to 10 years longer, tend to live healthier, and tend to heal faster. And so it's not a luxury, it's fundamental. So next slide shows that what is this thing about aim? Well, we have an evolutional impulse, I believe, as human beings. And that evolutional impulse is to make things better. And one of the people I learned this from, in addition to my study, was this man on the screen. His name is Kampala. And he's an 85-year-old hunter-gatherer in Tanzania, East Africa. I met this man about 15 years ago, and he's become a mentor of mine. In fact, he died last year, but he's still a mentor to mine, and that bow and arrow that you see is hanging right in front of me over my desk. Kampala, I was interviewing Kampala, is from a tribe in East Africa called the Hadza, spelled H-A-D-Z-A. The Hadza are the last of the hunter-gatherers in Africa that are leading the purely hunter-gatherer lifestyle still. There are only about 1,300 of them left, and about 400 of them are pure hunter-gatherers. And Kampala is one of the elders in that tribe. And I was with Kampala, and one of the sessions, and we were sitting around the fire late at night, and he said, "Richard, can I ask you a question away from the fire?" And through a translator, and he said to me, "Richard, do you know what the two most important days in your life are?" And I said, "Of course, birth and death." And he said, "Oh, my gosh," he said, "you write these books, you came over here in that airplane, you came out here in a Land Rover, and you don't even know the fundamental answer to the question that we say is the most important question. The two most important days in your life are what?" I said to Kampala. And he said, "Well, birth is one, and surviving childbirth in the hunter-gatherer culture is a big deal. And secondly," he said this, he said, "the second most important day is the day you determine why you're born, what your aim is." And he said, to survive for 75 to 100,000 years, as we Hadza have, we are a total sharing culture. Everybody has to have a reason to fit into the tribe. And I said, well, that's what purpose is all about. Finding your fit in the world, finding your fit at work, finding who you are and how you fit in and how you contribute. And so purpose is an evolutional impulse to make things better. Whether it's in the animal kingdom, the human kingdom, every sentient being has a reason. And humans get some choice and have to have experiences to figure out that reason. So purpose, next slide, is a practice. It's an aim, but it's also a practice. Life lesson number 3. Practice meaning that there's an old adage that says, knowledge is only rumor until it's in the muscle. Let me say that again. Knowledge is only rumor until it's in the muscle. Knowledge is only rumor until it's put into practice, until we do something with it, we act on it in certain ways. So purpose is a practice. It gets in the muscle and it becomes natural. It feels good. It doesn't feel like an obligation. It feels like a natural impulse, a natural instinct. I used to teach with a man named Stephen Covey, who wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People and Highly Effective People. Covey died about 5 years ago in an unfortunate bicycling accident at around the age of 80. But when I used to co-lead seminars with Stephen Covey, one time an organization we were working with sent out a journalist from their company magazine to interview us. And it was interesting because the woman who was the journalist sat through our seminar and she said, "I don't really get it." She said, "It seems like everything you're teaching is just common sense. Why are so many people so fascinated with this seminar and what you're teaching, and they sign up to get in it months in advance. And Covey looked at me and smiled, and he turned to her and he said that certainly what we're teaching is common practice, but common sense, but what we're really teaching is common practice. And that's what it's really all about. We're only as good as our practices. As leaders, as parents, as healthy people, what are your practices? What are the things you get up every day? We're always practicing something, but sometimes those practices need to be looked at and changed. So let's look at one practice, purpose practice, the next slide. I call it the 2-minute purpose practice. So here are the 3 steps. Step 1, pause. Takes no seconds whatsoever. Step 2, breathe. Takes 60 seconds. Step 3, picture. Takes 60 seconds. I call it the 2-minute purpose practice. So let me demonstrate. You get up in the morning. The first thing is to pause. Before you do it, don't go to your computer. Don't go to your cell phone. Don't check your email. Pause. Close your eyes and give yourself silence, solitude. Step 2, take 3 deep breaths. Try it right now while you're listening. Take 3 really big, deep breaths. So you do that for about a minute. Just close your eyes and deep breaths. It takes 3 breaths to center. We call that a centering practice. Then the third step is simply to picture your upcoming day. Picture one purpose moment, one person that you want to impact that day, that you want to have a positive effect on or with. And picture yourself with that person, listening, commenting, affirming, or it could be that some purposeful meeting you're going to be in, but pick somebody or something that you're going to do this day where you really want to make a personal difference. And then say to yourself, I'm going to make a difference in that situation. I'm going to commit to make a difference in that situation. That's what I call the 2-minute purpose practice. I do this all day long, but it starts in the morning and goes through the day. And pretty soon it gets in the muscle. It feels so good, and you start to get real results that you keep practicing it moving forward. So I'll talk about another practice in just a minute. But let me summarize by the next slide. And that is that purpose is a choice, purpose is an aim, and purpose is a practice. If you want to get healthy and you want to go to the gym and be maybe not like this gentleman, but you want to get better and more fit, you have to first make a choice and then decide what your aim is going to be, and then have a practice to go to the gym on a regular basis. Otherwise, we never get healthier. So choice, aim, practice. Let's look at the next slide here, and that is what's calling you. Purpose is a choice, as I said. Let's look at purpose at work here. Next slide. Backwards for a minute. Purpose is, if you look at those 2 lines, failure and meaning and despair, this is the model that was put on the blackboard for me by Viktor Frankl when I first met him. He said, ladies and gentlemen, draw this line horizontally from failure to success, which we all did. And he said, you could put yourself somewhere on that line. It's kind of the external success in the world factor. And then he said, now draw a second line, a vertical line from meaning to despair. And we can all put ourselves on that line, where we find ourselves, particularly with our work. On that line, is our work meaningful, or is it something that we don't want to get up and go to work and do on a day-to-day basis? He said sometimes we have a job where we're on the lower left-hand quadrant, where we've all had a job. We say, well, it pays the bills, perhaps, but it doesn't really give us that sense of fulfillment we look for, nor a lot of money. Sometimes we are on the lower right-hand quadrant, where we have a career. We've gone up the ladder of success, but we may be struggling with burnout or rust out, or a sense that, it's okay, but what else is there? What else could I be doing with my life? Sometimes we're in the upper left-hand box, we have a sense of mission. We love what we do, but we're not really we haven't figured out how to really make a living doing it in certain ways. Or we've retired perhaps, and we're at a stage of our life where we do have a sense of mission. We love what we do, but we don't get paid to do it. And then the right-hand box is where my study has been really calling. Calling is the inner urge to give your gifts away. It's having success and meaning in life. So next slide. Question is, what do you do? Who are you? How is work working for you these days? And I picked this slide because I did meet in the past, not too long ago, with a man who's a doctor for the astronauts, a doctor of internal medicine for the astronaut program in Houston, Texas, NASA Space Center. And he was at a seminar I was teaching on purpose and meaning in the second half of life, and he looked to be about 40 years old, and I said, "What are you doing here, doctor?" And he said, "I'm here to find out how to help astronauts in the second half of their life." And he said, "Well, is that a big deal?" And I said, and he said, "Well, Mr. Leider, what would you do in the second half of your life if you'd walked on the moon in the first half?" And he smiled. Or excuse me, I smiled. He didn't. He said, "It's a big deal. All of us hit a point in our lives where there could be a downturn where we need to reimagine the next phase of our lives." And astronauts, to be an astronaut, you have to have a real mission mindset, a real mission purpose focus. But what do you do when that focus is no longer on being an astronaut and going to the moon or doing whatever you do? Now we need to look at what's next in our lives. So what do you do is a really dangerous question, because it has a lot to do with our identity. There's an old adage that says, if you are what you do, when you don't, you aren't. And many times when we don't, we aren't, or we struggle with what's next. I just did an interview with the Atlantic magazine a couple of weeks ago, and the October issue of the Atlantic is going to have this story in it. But the interview with me was, you're Barack Obama's coach for what's next in his life. How do you coach Barack Obama? How do you coach a president who's no longer going to be in the most powerful role, and who's going to look at what's next? Their kids are going off, empty nest, spouse perhaps going to have her own career. Surely you can do a book in a library, etc. But every human being is an experiment of one. Even the President of the United States, even an astronaut. We all need to push the pause button and look at different times at what's next. So next slide. So my idea of a pointless job is one that doesn't fulfill us. It doesn't give us that sense of calling. And when I was, back before I founded my own company, and I was a chief human resources officer for a major company here in Minneapolis, actually. And at the time, I also had a plan B. I had a practice on the side. I called it Lunch Hour Limited. And being a career coach, executive life coach, I would coach you during the lunch hour if you bought me lunch. Kind of a good deal. You buy me lunch, I coach you. I call it Lunch Hour Limited. It was limited to lunch hour, 60 minutes. And here's what I found. 80% of the people I coached quit. They didn't actually quit the company. They often quit what they were doing. They reinvented, reimagined their job to bring more of who they were to it. Many of them felt like their work was pointless. They were spending 60% of their most valuable time doing something that really was not to the point of who they were. And so what's the point? Next slide. Here's the point. I call this the napkin test. And I also call it the Got a Minute School of Coaching, because people today will often say, well, Richard, you got a minute? Can you tell me what I should do with the rest of my life? And if people only have a minute, because so many people today are struggling with hurry sickness, struggling with busyness, etc. So I said, well, if you only got a minute, take out a napkin and jot down this formula. This is the formula for calling. And it's gifts plus passions plus values equals your calling. Are you clear on your gifts? Gifts are your talents, the natural things your hand turns to naturally, the things you really love doing. A gift is something often we haven't had a lot of coaching on. We just got a degree, started our work world, and didn't get a lot of coaching on what we're really good at, what we love to do, and how we can bring more of that into our lives and into our work. So a gift has certain characteristics. Think of what you love to do on a day-to-day basis, whether or not you're doing it in your job or not today. Hopefully you are, because you spend 60% of your life there. But picture what you love to do, number one. Number two, others often observe it. If you were to ask others, hey, what do you observe? What do I really love doing? What do you see me really turned on by doing? Particularly in the work world, but with my talents. Third, often we can't remember learning it. Oh, I don't have a degree in that. Like me, I've never had a writing course in my life, and yet I've written 10 books and 3 bestsellers, self-taught writer. I love writing. I get up every morning to write. I write for about an hour every morning. Most of what I write isn't worth reading, but it's something I love to do. My hand turns to naturally. I'm drawn back to it over and over again. And it's also something you love to talk about, learn about, talk to others about. I love to talk to other writers, other authors, etc. What about you? What are your gifts? Passions, what are your interests? What are the things that really get you up in the morning and say, wow, if I could use my gifts, writing about this, teaching about this, coaching about this, fixing this, what are the things that really interest you? What are you curious about? Curiosity is fundamental to purpose. We do best when we use our most enjoyed gifts on things we're really curious about. That brings us passion. And finally, values. Values are where you work, where you do what you do. If you get up in the morning and you use your gifts on something you feel passionate or curious about, in an environment where you have a voice, where the values there allow you to bring who you are to work on a day-to-day basis, to have a voice in matters, and to not, then you've got a sense of calling. So try it. Jot down, after today's webinar, work with the napkin test. Look at your gifts, passions, and values. You can also go to my website, richardleider.com, and you can do an online version of the napkin test, and that'll be online. So let me give you, before we open this up to Q&A, let me give you, if you're still struggling with purpose, a default purpose. So the next slide is the default purpose. So tonight, or today sometime, take out a Post-it and write on it these words: grow and give. This is fundamentally what purpose is about. It's about growing and giving throughout one's whole life. And so grow and give. And if you put a Post-it on the mirror, when you get up in the morning and you look at that Post-it and you're brushing your teeth and you say, how am I going to grow and give today? Grow doesn't mean you have to read something, go to school, but it means you're going to learn something today. How are you going to learn? How are you going to grow? If you're not growing, you're dying in certain ways. As Bob Dylan said, the poet, songwriter, singer said, he who is not busy being born is busy dying. We need to continue to grow throughout our lives, to be curious, and to give. That's the second part of it. How am I going to make a dent today, a purpose moment, that 2-minute purpose practice, that contribution in some ways? And so put that on your mirror, and then picture your day. At the end of the day, as you're brushing your teeth before you go back to bed, say to yourself, how did I do today? Did I practice this? Did I grow and give today? I guarantee you, at the end of 7 days, you'll know a lot about your purpose. Purpose often comes this way. It comes from taking your number one gift and saying, here's how I'm going to make a dent in the world. My purpose is to help other people unlock their purpose. It hasn't always been that, but I've learned over time that what gives me great satisfaction, whether it's writing about it, speaking like I am at this moment about it, or doing other things, what I love to help people do is to unlock the reason for getting up in the morning. So try the Post-it test. And let me conclude with this slide. E.B. White said this. He said, I arise in the morning torn between a desire to improve or save the world and a desire to enjoy or savor the world. This makes it hard to plan the day. Well, you might have smiled at this, but in all deference to E.B. White, I think it makes it easier to plan the day. Because I think a well-lived life is a balanced life between arising in the morning, having the reason to get up in the morning, to give, to improve or save, and as you know, it doesn't mean save the world literally, but to make a dent, and a desire to enjoy or savor the world, to enjoy life and to enjoy the fruits of our labor in certain ways. And if we plan to get both every day, I think we will end up with a fulfilling life. So my purpose is to help you unlock yours. I hope that this has been helpful to you, and if so, it will have been a well-lived day for me. So John, back to you. Do we have any questions, comments, challenges, whatever?
All right. Thank you so much, Richard, and I love the Bob Dylan quote as well. All right, everyone online, we have over 180 still with us right now. If you have questions, just type it into the question pane of your GoToWebinar panel, and we'll field them as they come in. So do not be shy, and feel free to type something in. So we'll just give folks a few seconds to start typing some things in. Richard, from your website, what are other things that you had mentioned that there's a version of the napkin test? Is there anything else on your website that people can check out?
Yeah, the next slide gives my website just so
All right,
visual.
I'll move it to that just for that. And we are getting questions in. So there's, yep, go ahead.
Everything on my website is free, and it's things to watch, things to listen to, things to read, tools download, and things like that. And so one of those things is called calling cards, and it's basically the napkin test, and you can do an online version of it. I have been for the last 5 years the chief curator AARP in Washington, D.C., their Life Reimagined Institute, and you'll find another website, lifereimagined.org. You'll find a whole host of free materials as well as things you can sign up for. And one more, let me just give a third version, and that is thebigknow.com. The Big No, KNOW.com, where there's a free e-course that you can take of mine, Discover What's Next. And they'll tell you when the next free version is, but it's a 10-lesson free e-course in depth on what we're talking about here.
Excellent.
Okay, John, back to you.
All right. Well, we do have a lot of good questions coming in. One of our attendees writes, if you're feeling trapped in your job or career and you feel like you know your calling/mission, what's a good first step?
Well, first step is to don't go it alone. One of the things I write about is that isolation is fatal. Sometimes we feel trapped and we feel alone. And so to not do it alone, I suggest that you have a sounding board. Much like a personal board of directors or a kitchen cabinet, a sounding board are a few people who you can talk things through with. So here are 4 characters that I think are essential or fundamental to a sounding board, John. One is a committed listener, somebody you can really talk to, who's not there to fix you, but is there to listen and help you clarify what it is you're thinking and where you might be stuck. Secondly, is a catalyst, somebody who maybe has done what you're thinking of, who is out there. You go out and you interview people who are doing what you'd love to do. Information interviewing is what you might call it, but find people who are doing what you love to do and figure out a way to talk with them and ask them, what do they love most? What do they love least about what they're doing? And what do they recommend? Third are wise elders, teachers or people, or they could be authors, they could be parents or grandparents, but wise elders are people who help you keep your eye on the big picture. And then the fourth person is your personal coach. And that doesn't mean you have to hire a coach, but somebody who holds you accountable to certain actions. Start to say, okay, I'm going to talk to 3 people this week who are doing the work I love. At the end of the week, they say, well, did you talk to the 3 people? Oh, no, I was too busy. And they don't let you off the hook. So anyway, having a sounding board is really critical. And I won't coach anybody unless they have a sounding board. Why? Because I see it works. And if I work with people, I don't want them dependent on me. I want them to have their own people in their lives that they can be transparent with, talk with, get feedback from, etc.
Thank you. I'm going to combine 2 questions together. What advice do you have for college students or maybe young professionals who are early in their career who feel like their purpose changes month to month, or perhaps they just started a career in a certain area but then lost interest really quickly? What advice would you have for that demographic?
Well, there are 6 steps to doing the work of the purpose work. So let me give the 6 steps. And if you think about it as a circle as opposed to a linear line, the 6 steps are, or 6 practices, if you will, are reflect, connect, explore, choose, repack, and act. So reflect means that you need to be reflective. You need to do that napkin test. Secondly, connect. You need to have a sounding board. Millennials, in particular, are tribal, and they need to talk with each other in deeper ways, and also have some elders that they talk to, or olders they talk to. Third is to continue to explore. So many people, their careers chose them. They didn't choose it. And so they get to the middle of their lives and they say, well, you know, I never chose this, but I did it for finances or because I didn't know any other way. So I think exploring means to really look around and after you do the napkin test, like I said earlier, and find out where it is that people are doing the average, the work you love. The average career today, according to the Department of Labor, is 4 years. And 41% of the American workforce are contingent, just like whoever asked the question, perhaps. Contingent means they're part-time, they're contract, they're piecemeal, they're somehow in a non-permanent transitional work state. And according to the Department of Labor, half of the American labor force is going to be continually reimagining themselves over and over again. To do that, you have to understand exactly what your offer is. What is it that you do well and that you have distinctions in that you can bring to the party on a day-to-day basis? Choosing means to follow up and stay committed for a year or two to something, even though it isn't perfect. Bring more and more of yourself. Use it as an experimental laboratory and to learn what you don't want to do. Part and parcel of really good career coaching is to figure out what you don't want to do as fast as you can. And then repack. I wrote an international best-selling book called Repack Your Bags, Lighten Your Load for the Good Life. And repack means, what do you need to let go of? What's in your way? What are you hanging on to here that isn't serving you well? Whether it's advice from your parents or other people or teachers, or whether it's what do you need to unpack and let go of here in order to free up your time to repack to do what's essential. And then finally, act. What's one small step you can take every single day to further what you're doing? And so act means to take that small single step one day at a time, every single day. So those 6 practices are ultimately what I would recommend. I know there's a lot in that. You can go on my website and look at it for more. You can also look at it in a book I wrote. There's 2 of them, actually. One is called Life Reimagined. The other one's called Work Reimagined. And Work Reimagined is all about how to really figure out this work conundrum. And the opening chapter in that book is this: it's the end of work as we know it. It's the end of work as we know it. So Work Reimagined in that book, that opening chapter says, look, whatever you were taught probably isn't true about the work world today. Get over it. Start to look at the new realities of work and work life.
Here's another question, and actually I think the 6 steps you just touched on might relate to it, but I hear this a lot from alumni I come across. How do you get past the fear, and the word fear is in capital letters, the fear of making a major career change or shift?
Well, I think that, first of all, following the 6 practices, having a sounding board, there really is no way around it. The only way is into it. There's an old adage. I first went to Africa, and I was on the board of trustees of Outward Bound. And I went there to climb Kilimanjaro and to learn about the African Outward Bound school. And I fell in love with Africa, and I've been going back ever since. And one of the adages in Outward Bound is this: if you're rock climbing or you're in a conundrum where there's real fear, the adage is, if you can't get out of it, get into it. If you're hanging on the side of a cliff and you're rock climbing and you just are so fearful because you're up high and you look down and you look up and there's no way out. Well, you can't stay there forever. If you can't get out of it, get into it. And when someone makes that decision to get into it, oftentimes they go right up and they do what's necessary and they get out of their own way. And so there really is no easy answer to the fear in capital letters. But the way out of it is into it. And the way you get into it is to have practices and support and deal with the fear as it comes up.
Here's a really thoughtful question. What advice do you have for couples who each want to follow their passion or purpose, but they lead in different directions? When is it okay to make sacrifices for love?
Well, I think it's a great question. I hear it all the time, whether people are married or partnered or whatever. And the key is, first of all, to know thyself, know what you want, and know what the other person wants. Be able to have the courageous conversation and to be a committed listener. And one of the things that is in the book, Repacking Your Bags, and that is also on my website, is something called the Good Life Inventory. And one of the things to check out is, well, partner, what is your vision of the good life? And the good life has 4 components to it: place, people, right work, and purpose. Living in the place you love, with the people you love, doing the work you love on purpose. So you have that discussion, and maybe this year it's time for you to make the concessions or the compromises to support your partner. And this comes up a lot with place. People don't want to live in the same place. They have different visions. How do they work that out? Well, the starting point is to not argue about it, but to be crystal clear about what is it exactly, and let's see if we can find a compromised place. If not, maybe we have to move to where you want and try it out on an experimental basis. Maybe we vacation there for a week and see if it really isn't as good or bad as we think. So the key is to have tools, frameworks to talk about, have those courageous conversations, and then at certain times we make compromises about, maybe this is your year, we'll vacation where you want to go. Next year, mine. And it has a lot to do with retirement, for example. Some people don't want to retire and the other person does want to retire, or they want to move and the other person doesn't want to move. But how do they handle that? Well, it doesn't work very well because the highest divorce rate is at the retirement age, which is unfortunate, and it has a lot to do with no longer willing to make the compromises or not knowing how to go about having that discussion.
Mm-hmm. Another attendee writes in, is there a difference between our purpose in our professional lives and our purpose in our personal lives? Do they need to be linked?
They need absolutely to be linked. The starting point is a mindset. The starting point is a fundamental mindset about growing and giving. No matter whether you're in a concentration camp, a workplace, life at home, is it about me or about you? And what it means is a balance between self-absorption or savoring and purpose or saving. And so ultimately, the great saints, sages, yogis, great teachers, great spiritual guides, they talk about mindfulness in life there's no boundaries between work and play, work and life. We bring who we are to whatever the circumstance is. So the starting point for purpose is this mindset. Then we start to look at it in terms of a work world. Then we start to make some distinctions about purposeful work. But so sometimes people say, well, I'm purposeful at home and not purposeful at work. I find that to be pretty much unbelievable, because it's about who you bring to every single moment. That's why I talk about purpose practices and bringing that practice to every transaction you're in. That's called an evolved or mindful life in certain ways.
Mm-hmm. One question came in referring back to the grid that you displayed earlier. The person's wondering, what are more ways to move from mission to calling?
Well, I think that's a real complicated question. It's a great question. But the key is to figure out, is there a way to make a living doing what you're mission driven by? Is there a way to make, and the starting point is, what is a living? How much is enough? What's your number? And the whole business of purpose and money is a huge one, and I've written extensively about it in The Power of Purpose and other places. Everybody needs money. Money, medicine, health, and meaning. And so the key is to figure out, and people say, well, that's great, but I can't make a living doing this. I tell you, I have file cabinets full of data about people who are doing things that other people say are impossible. It takes that 6 practices to explore who's making a living doing the mission that you have. And you really need to do your homework and do your exploration and figure out who out there actually has figured that out. And it may not be possible, but 90-some% of the time there are ways to move from mission to calling by figuring out how to get paid for what you're doing. You know, the entrepreneurial revolution is not just young people. More people 60 and over are becoming entrepreneurs, following their passion and their mission by building business in any other age cohort out there today. So it's not easy. It takes work, but it can be.
Richard, thank you so much for your time today and sharing your insights with our audience of alumni, students, and friends here at the University of Minnesota. Just can't tell you how much I've appreciated everything you brought to today's webinar.
You're welcome, John, and thanks a lot for setting it up and for the privilege of doing it. Maybe we'll do another one in the future.
I would love that. I would love that. And thanks again, and have a good day. And I'll segue out here now back to our slide deck. Just give me 1 second, everybody, as we close out. Thanks again for all those who joined us. And in closing, the members of the University of Minnesota Alumni Association help make initiatives like our webinar series possible. So thank you. And if you're interested in becoming a member of our association, visit us at umnalumni.org/membership. And definitely, if you'd like to check out Richard's website, it's richardleider.com. And we will send out the recording of this webinar after the fact. So just give us a few business days, and we'll also we'll have it up on the Alumni Association YouTube playlist for viewing afterwards. But that's the conclusion of today's webinar. This is John Ruzek signing off and wishing you all a wonderful day. Thank you.